Hi, I'm Christian Guzman, and I approve of the Board Shorts and Banter podcast.
What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the Board Shorts and Banter podcast. We have got two very special guests joining us this evening. We have got I believe you are 2 out of 4 people from the DFBA Global. Am I right in saying that?
Yep, you could just call us part of the executive branch, I guess, sure.
Yes, we have got half of the executive branch of the DFBA Global. We've got Brandon and Dr. James Johnson. How are you doing, gentlemen?
Couldn't be better now.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Wonderful. Well, we've got loads of questions to run through. I feel like most of them are just going to be like mine and Tom's, but I do feel like if we've got these questions, then there's going to be another 200-300 people that also have the same questions. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Don't sell yourself short. There might be thousands listening, right?
Yeah, that's right.
True.
Right before we even started, you guys said, hey, is there something you do or don't want to talk about? And what we said was, listen, our whole message is about transparency and people understanding who we are so we can better the industry. So we want to hear from you. We want to hear from them. And hopefully this will just shed some light for you guys and for them.
Yeah. We're on a mission here to elevate natural bodybuilding. Obviously, we're like men's physique, but as a whole, our audience are very, very engaged, natural competitors and whatnot. So I feel like what you guys are, what I feel like you're trying to do, aligns with kind of what we're trying to do as well. So to have you on and talk about that, spread that message as well to our audience, make them more aware of it. Where there's like nearly 1,000 people that tune into each episode now. I think it's going to be a really good episode.
Yeah, look, the whole reason why we started this movement in general is because, just like you said, there's so many questions about where natural bodybuilding is going, and there's so many people chomping at the bit for information in terms of how this transformative period of the sport is going to wind up. And our entire purpose is to make sure it doesn't wind up like it has been for the last 5 to 10 years, where there is a transformative moment where the athletes are better focused in terms of, hey, how am I going to pay for this sport? What is my trajectory in terms of how I'm going to take my career in this sport? What does it really mean to be a professional in natural bodybuilding? And what are the federation heads doing to ensure that there's not just a level playing field, but somewhere to move up from? So that's why we love podcasts like this, man, is we're hoping that you guys will close the podcast out at the end of this hour and be like, man, now I really see where this is going and I want to be a part of the movement.
Yeah. Right, anyway, well, before we start off with our boring questions, I feel like it is super important to know who both of you guys are and like what your histories in natural bodybuilding is. So, Dr. James, would you like to tell the listeners what you have achieved, what you've done over your bodybuilding career? And yeah, just tell us a bit about yourself.
Yeah, my resume is not all that exceptional, especially since I'm leading and Brandon's going to follow up and he's got all the titles and you can see behind him if you're watching like everything he's got there.
That's why I said you first, James.
Yeah. I'll break the ice. So I've been competing since 2017. I've had 4 competitive seasons, still an amateur, right? So like nothing groundbreaking there. But coach a team of athletes that's growing every single year. And any of your listeners, if they do know me, probably know me as one of the co-founders of Natty News Daily, right? So like my imprint in the sport, if you will likely be through methods like this, right? More on the business side of thing, the media side of thing, trying to grow the sport outside of just my athletic career, because unfortunately, as much as I love the sport, it doesn't love me quite as much, unfortunately. The genetics are a little bit of a limiting factor there, and we'll keep competing, but yeah, I don't see myself winning world titles and things like that.
Don't dampen yourself, mate. If you've got the work rate and time, you'll get there eventually, I'm sure.
James, mate, listen, I relate, all right? I relate.
Yeah, it's for the love of the game, right?
But at least, right, you've got a doctorate. I'm just like a bad bodybuilder and don't have a doctorate. So, it could be...
There's still time for one or the other, man. There's still time.
Yeah.
And Tom does men's physique, so you're still not even a bodybuilder, mate.
Yeah, technically.
Yeah. Well, if you talk to people on the internet, the doctorate, all you have to do is just pay the right people and you get one, right? You don't even have to be smart or anything. So, I mean, that's how I got it. I got it out of a cereal box. It was a little prize.
Yeah. Yeah, just send me over your guy and, we'll get things sorted.
Yep.
Just cross it out with permanent marker, write your name in, it'll be fine.
Or change your name to James Johnson and you're basically...
That's a good point, yeah.
There's enough of it. It's not a very unique name,
Brandon, tell us about yourself, mate.
So, yes, my name is obviously Brandon Lirio. I have an extensive history only since about probably 2012 was my first show, and the first couple of years of my competitive history are not very competitive at all because I started lifting late in life. But since then, I have went pro in the NGA and the PNBA, and I was 1 point decision away from a WNBF card. Here in Connecticut. I've won the Natural Olympia 3 times, Mr. Universe twice. I was Athlete of the Year back in 2018 and was inducted into the Natural Bodybuilding Hall of Fame during COVID. I've been on the cover of Iron Man magazine. We ran a podcast with Generation Iron called the United States of America, and we had a subsequent video series called The World's Strongest Everyman. And I own my own training business, a line of supplement stores up here in the Northeast called Battleground Nutrition, and we're currently working on launching a veteran outreach company through marijuana, through the dispensaries in terms of non-prescription painkillers and anxiety that doesn't require SSRIs for anxiety control called Battleground Buds. That'll be coming in the near future. And I've basically been on every stage that you could possibly think of in 5 different continents and 27 different countries. And I've won countless continental and overall titles. I'm a world-level certified judge, and I love the smell of my own farts, apparently, which is why these intros are so long. But realistically, look, I'm just another competitor here who wants the sport to be better because I'll segue it like this, guys. All those titles and everything, I still work at a local gym training other people, right? Like, we consider that to be this great pedigree, but the sport, just like James said, and like you guys said, Tom and Josh have probably said this on their podcast multiple times since they started it, is that, you know, the industry and the sport doesn't always love us back the same way that we invest ourselves into it. And so as we get into your guys' questions, that's our whole purpose, is to make sure that over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years, the sport loves us back again and really repays us in kind for building it from the ground up. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That is an incredible intro. But do you know what? Both of you, in your own ways, they're the most impressive intros that we've had. And we've had, like, you know, guys that have qualified for the Olympia and, you know, all the natty pros that you could shake a stick at. But yeah, that was pretty impressive. Anything to add, Tom?
No, I guess it's safe to say then, like, in terms of, like, people that are heading, you know, this organisation that you're building, like, you're pretty qualified to do so then.
We better hope so.
Yeah.
You know,
I guess we'll find out, right?
I mean, look, I also have a business management degree that I'm working on my master's for kinesiology and sports nutrition. But yeah, I mean, we stand in front of these cameras to talk to you guys, and we look a lot younger than you would expect, you know, the heads of the actual federations to look, and we think that that's actually a benefit to us, where we've stepped on stages in the last 3 years. We've heard what people have been saying for 5 to 10 years. I think that those pieces of our pedigree in terms of the athletes feeling comfortable talking to us and, you know, talking to us as peers instead of people who are in these management positions to be able to make this change is because I think that the proximity to our careers actually makes us more qualified to do this than any degree or any, you know, title that you're going to find on a shelf behind us on a podcast. So
yeah, we're still connected to the industry and will continue to be so as athletes, as coaches, as competitors, as judges, as, you know, everything, right? Like, our lives revolve around this industry. But that's a really good point, because it's not just us too. Like, when it is announced who the remainder of the 4 are and who was affiliating with this and all that, we had the luxury when we were creating this to hand select people for their strengths, right? So I know my weaknesses. Brandon knows his weaknesses. Like, I am not a detail guy when it comes to, like, show promotion itself and all the X's and O's of that. But I am a really good ideas guy. I'm great on podcasts, right? That's what I do. So we put people in positions where they can succeed, and then we work together to match each other's weaknesses.
Got you. Okay. So who else right now then? I believe, Josh, did you say there's 4? Who else do you have on board right now working alongside you?
That will, for probably the next week and a half, remain a secret. I will say that they are both individuals who are executives within federations, so they're bringing on board federations with them. They have extensive promotion background as well as, like, business background within the sport. So they are the ones, if Brandon and I are kind of the face of the industry right now, or the face of the movement, they are the back end, the guys that are making sure that we can actually like hold up all these claims that we're about to make.
Yeah. The other guys, are they both based over, you know, your side of the water, or is there anyone from Europe, the UK?
So I will say right now we are
for people on the audio, they both just nodded at they're over our side of the water.
One is domestic to the U.S., one is international over in Europe. And I will say that we are currently in talks with 3 to 4 individuals that are affiliated with federations that are international, and about the same domestic as well.
Okay.
Cool.
So when did the actual idea for this come about then?
That's been some time in the works. It might seem like this is all new, but I actually began working on what is now the Code of Conduct back in 2023. It started as a simple petition. There were some rules and regulations that came out around that time period, which I was displeased with, made my voice very open and public about that. So I created what I saw as grievances that the industry, grievances within the industry. These are the things that are wrong, and here's how I, as a nobody, propose we fix them. The goal was to have a bunch of athletes sign off, coaches sign off, public people sign off on this, and just send it to the federations and say, this is the voice of the people, this is what we want. I quickly realized, though, that while a petition is cool and it unites the voices of the people, it has no power, right? Because these businesses are private entities. They can do what they want. So you can scream into the void all you want, but unless you have something to incentivize them to change, you won't cause change. So that's why we created this, right? A true governing body, give them power within the sport amongst their peers, but base it on this code of conduct, these bylaws that protect the athlete, protect the professionalism, the rights, open borders across federations, all those things that we're now posting about and really believe in.
Yeah, I feel like you'll know the answer to this. What federations don't allow you to compete with other federations? Because as far as I was aware, it was only the IFBB that wasn't allowed in like a cross-pollination thing.
I will say this, because this has been an interesting perspective in terms of talking to athletes both here in the States and then overseas. You're right. The NDA that you have to sign, or sorry, not the NDA, the non-compete agreement, only belongs to an IFBB contract, simply because their pro ranks, I guess you could say, based on the money coming in. If I were an athlete with the IFBB that really was Olympia bound, it makes sense for me to sign a non-compete. The natural bodybuilding federations realistically only don't have a non-compete because even if, let's say, you're one of the top 3 major natural bodybuilding federations, the idea that even if I win the Yorton Cup and the Mr. America and the PNBA Olympia every single year, I just made $40,000. Okay, that's a huge stand-up position in terms of financially. But arguably, right, when was the last time, male or female, bodybuilding, bikini, doesn't matter, can any of you name an athlete that actually did that in the last 10 years, had won all of those major titles?
Natalie came pretty close, so I'm going to counter you on that.
Pretty close. She missed only one of them one year and then flipped on the other one, right?
Yeah.
But the problem with that is we as athletes all agree. If men's physique is X, I should be able to go to this stage, that stage, that stage, and be held to the same standard. We're not saying that you're not, but it's very interesting that even with a non-compete, almost no one has been able to move between those stages and see the same level of judges' scrutiny on a level playing field to be able to make the point, see, there's no individual biases. So from my perspective, I don't even necessarily see a non-compete being signed. But what I can tell you is, having been at my position, the amount of federation heads that reached out to me in the off-season and said, come compete with us, but you can't do X show, or if you did do a show and you went to a show that you'd done before, the head promoter going, why'd you waste your time doing that other show? You know that they're not on the level. It's not an official non-compete. But I'll tell you, having been at my level, that some of the federations, and I'm not speaking for all of them, and I won't mention them by name because it may just be individual promoters, but what I can tell you is that the verbal non-compete does exist. for most federations. If you show up and you try to compete on their stages and you want to be their pro that winds up on the poster or the banner, and then you want to go to the Yorton Cup the next week or the WNBF Worlds the month later, the odds that that's going to be well received by the time it gets back to the original promoter or the promoter that you're headed to, probably not very likely. So I would agree with you that right now the only one that exists in a wet ink situation is the IFBB. But no athlete who's ever been on a world stage would be able to tell you that they haven't felt some level of, why are you doing that other show, when they talk to another federation. That's just the way it is.
And that's not to say, too, that historically didn't happen, right? Like, I can remember in my competitive history 2 federations that had some version of regulation that restricted where their athletes went or how they went about competing in other federations. Trying to be a little bit PC here and not name names, but it has happened in the past, and our documents hopefully would protect that from coming back.
Do you not think, though, the fact that, like, you could have, so like in the UK we've got the BNBF, the UK DFBA, the WNBF, we've got NPA. From this year we're going to have the OCB and PCA Naturals. Do you not think that the lack of consistency with the results kind of suggests that, like, natural bodybuilding is that competitive and that it's not a subconscious bias from the judges? So, like,
sure,
I've seen it in my physique, like, I've just named 6 federations there. That's going to be, not all of them are on the same weekend, so that's potentially a 6 to 10 week competing window where you're going to have your moments of, like, being shit hot, and then you're going to have your moments of not looking great. And you that will obviously affect your placing.
The first thing I want to say in terms of, because you mentioned one very specifically, and I'm not meaning to isolate them because the IFBB is doing this in the United States too. When you mention the PCA Naturals, right? Yeah. You have federations that have an untested side that, because of their clout and money, have been convinced that they, because of their infrastructure and because of the actual framework that they've built, can basically plug and play now and do this other untapped, at least on their version, market, which would be the natural federations. You have a much healthier message. The longevity of the athletes tends to be a lot better, and there tends to be a larger athlete pool to pull from because of those two things. But the problem is that when you say those federations specifically and throw that into the mix of the other federations, like the UK DFBA, which I know tests 100% in terms of, hey, listen, this is what we're doing, you got to show up. They're only focused on making sure that the judges' criteria matches it will match at higher levels. The problem when you have untested federations moving into the naturals is they now have a choice to make. Are they going to try to match what the vast majority of the median athletes look like within natural bodybuilding, or are they trying to find natural versions, some people would say with quotation marks attached to them, that look like they're untested athletes? Okay, that already skews the results then. If you're throwing that in the mix, that's essentially like saying, we've collected 5 chefs and we're going to see if they can make the same level of a lasagna. And then as they're cooking, it turns out one of them is a professional chef. Well, great, then automatically one of those is going to look and be very different. So if that's the case, then, okay, let's take at least 25% of what you would consider the competitor pool for that and say those ones are going to have a judge's bias based on the fact that the judges were picked when they were looking for a specific enhanced look, and now the natural side is going to try and match as closely to that as possible, whether or not you believe those athletes are natural. The other ones, though, right? This is what we've said from the very beginning. We did a podcast on this in the United States of America, and we actually talked about it on Natty News Daily when me and Layla, my old co-hosts, were chatting back and forth about what you could do to create more clout and more hype for natural bodybuilding. But the problem is, just like you said, with all these old heads and old figureheads that are hanging around, hey, this is my federation, this is how I built it, the message about what they wanted their athletes to even look like becomes very different. So what the DFBA, in terms of our codes of conduct and bylaws, meant to aim to fix first and foremost was a lot of those smooth edges in terms of, well, if this federation believes that classic physique shouldn't be less than 7% body fat, well, then that guy showing up to a federation that basically has said, if you can be as lean and shredded as possible, we don't necessarily care how big you are. This is basically a condition contest versus a bodybuilding contest. You can't expect to travel even if there's open borders between those things. So where our argument is that DFBA aims to even eliminate that question within the first year or two by saying you have to show us your judges' standards. Show us the criteria by which you're going to judge these athletes and let us know it's replicatable. Because if it's not, then there's always going to be a situation where you could say, well, you said it was supposed to look like this and instead it looks like this. This looks like politics. Even if it's only in optics, our aim is to try to fix that.
Mm-hmm. Right. I have a few questions on that. Right. So for starters, how would you come up with what is deemed to be the gold standard of that? That is the measurable of bodybuilding, bikini, figure, men's physique. Have we lost Brandon?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We've lost Brandon, guys.
So
right. Okay.
I'll jump back in.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Doctor.
So the beauty of it is it's not me and Brandon deciding. We're creating this board of directors. So it is a cohesive voice of all these federation executives, athlete representatives, individuals within the industry that make up this board that all will vote on these things. So it's not one person saying, this is what I think and this is the way it will be. It's hopefully 10, 15 individuals that are global representatives of their demographic, being the athletes, the pros, the federations, saying this is what the majority of people want. So that's the direction the sport is going to go.
Mm-hmm. Right. So this is the secret people that are going to be coming on board, and then all heads come together and then decide across the board, each obviously category, what is the look that we should be striving for across all federations.
Yes. Yeah. And you've actually seen that, at least in the US, some of the organizations have already begun that process, even like completely independent of us, which is obviously beneficial because we're much like you guys where there's an innumerable number of federations and you can go from one to the next and their classic looks completely different and their bodybuilding looks completely different. And people actually here almost choose to decide where they compete based on the expectation of that, right? Like for instance, I know for me, OCB classic physique right now, those dudes are massive. They are absolutely huge, right? I wouldn't stand a chance. WNBF bodybuilding, those guys are absolutely peeled inside out, right? So if you don't fit that criteria, good luck, right? So what we hope to do is we'll see that become more, like Brandon said, uniform across the industry, across all federations, where it's maybe evening out some of the extremity of it. But like you said, it's not us making those decisions. It's the board of directors who have been voted in. Now, obviously, like we're selecting who that board is for the first year, but it will be a democratic process going forward where there are term limits for these people and the pros and federations vote in who those people are.
So just going back to, the different federations and what they favour or what the athletes look like, do you not think that that's part of the magic of natural bodybuilding? Is that that federations have a bias, or not a bias, there's a look that gets rewarded in, the PMBA, there's a look that gets rewarded in the WNBF. Do you not think that there's an element of magic that we're going to end up missing by having everything completely uniform?
I don't think so. Like, let me say it this way. If you take the federation letters away and we put them all into one pool, and then you take a look at what the IFBB is doing with their new division, right? The fit model division. And the consensus for people who want to compete but are getting this kickback, hey, you're not big enough, you're not lean enough, your proportions are off, and this is supposed to be a more realistic adaptation of a physique, that's fine, right? If you take a look at what our outline for the DFBA is, it really solidifies one thing. If the magic of natural bodybuilding is, hey, if I go to the IFBB, the guys all look untested. And if I go to this natural bodybuilding pool, it's a level playing field. We're not saying that. What you said was, if I knew that this federation is looking for X look, then I can go there and know how I'll fare. Okay, that realistically then is just a ladder. Okay, I know if I'm too small but I can get mega shredded, then let's just use this as an example. The ANBF will accept me and I'll do really well. Whereas if I went to WNBF Worlds, I'm probably going to be too small if I try to cut that amount of body fat percentage because I'll lose my fullness. I wouldn't even necessarily call that the magic of it. What you've done is find a niche that you know the judges' criteria fits that plug, right? It's a male and a female that are now coming together to make something that now the recipe has made the complete package. The problem with that becomes this, and I'll say this as a purist in natural bodybuilding. This isn't to discourage anybody, this isn't to disparage anybody, but if you take a look at what we've said on previous podcasts, it's that we aim for our Super Bowl or our Olympiad of natural bodybuilding to be the best of the best. I don't know that the guys trying to put on a show of the best would be as unbiased to say, well, that's because there's room for everybody on that stage. Listen, guys, I'll be the first to say, I'm not great at everything, even though the first question I usually ask when I try something new is, what's the record on this? What's really good on this? Give me a metric that I can really shoot for, because I'm incredibly competitive. That's part of the magic about what makes me a bodybuilder, is that I love the competitive nature of it. And if what we're saying is, well, there's always this to do this and this to do that and that to do that, that essentially reads to me more like a money grab, where I know that if I cater to athletes that are smaller and can't get bigger but can get more shredded, then they'll all come to me. Okay, but realistically then you're not saying we have the best athletes. What you're saying is we've made it very well defined and known that if you fall into this bucket, you'll do well with us. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with that. But I would say if what you're doing, having us on the podcast and talking to other people that want to win the Orton Cup, the Olympia, the WNBF Worlds, the Sandows, the GBOs, whatever it may be, you're talking about winning world-level events. I want to be very clear. Whether you're in the NFL and you're at the Super Bowl, whether you're in the NHL, whether you're in the Premier League for English football in Europe, whatever it may be, you don't want to show up and have to worry about the magic of the referee. Those rules should be black and white. This is how you win the game. So what we're saying is we don't want to discourage people from competing. But if you want your wall to look like this, there shouldn't be magic in the judging. It should be black and white, 100%, this is how you succeed. And if you can't, try harder. And if you can't when you try harder, I'm really happy that you gave it your all. But that's what this sport is. It's not called showing up. It's called competing. And if we want to win, we need to know how to do that. So we at least aim to take the frills off of it so that you can see what makes up the scorecards and see how you'll fare. But I would argue no. I think the magic of natural bodybuilding is taking the human form and the physique and your work ethic to push it to something that no one may have seen before, right? I actually hate the way they talk about Lee Haney in this sense, where they go, Lee Haney, yes, Lee Haney and Ronnie Coleman are tied for the most amount of Olympias, but when he competed, there wasn't really that much competition. It doesn't matter. He was the best in the world at what he did. I don't want our show or anyone else's world-level show to turn into that, where they go, yeah, but the competitor pool was pretty weak. Then show up. Then you show up. You show up and compete. So I hope that was, enough of an answer to say, I don't want there to be magic. If what you're talking about is world-level events where there's open borders for invites to go out and people to bring their best, there's no magic. Either you show up the best or you lose. That's what it is.
If we simplified that, he's trying to take the what if out of things, right? Like we've all seen it. Like you're the world champion of this federation, but what if this guy showed up? What if that guy showed up, right? Let's just put them on the same stage, right? And we'll filter them so those people are still winning in their home federations, but now you get to go test yourself one more time against the champions of all the federations, right? Or at least that's the hope.
I've got no real skin in the game here. I'm not going to try and become the governing body that tries to fix this problem. But to me, the thing that jumps out of right, do this to fix it. Put on a huge show at the end of every year, for argument's sake, call it the MBW International Classic, whatever you want to call it. and give people a reason to fly from wherever they are in the world to step on one stage. Like, you, depending on what country someone's been brought up in. For instance, you know, we're in the UK. When I first started getting into natural bodybuilding, the only thing I was bothered about was a UK DFBA national title and winning my WNBF pro card, right? I speak to, you know, I've got clients in South America. They have that same emotion towards the INBA, towards, you know, different feds. It's such a difficult problem that you're trying to fix, that I think that the solution's almost a lot simpler than trying to get every single federation to change their criterias of judging. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. Listen, we're not saying this isn't a Herculean task. And look, I am 100% in the camp of telling people, dude, you have to admit when you got it wrong, or you have to admit when there's something that you could have done better. We're not saying that we have these answers and that we're going to fix it right off the bat from day one and everybody's going to realize, you know, eat, pray, love, we go walk into the sunset and then the credits roll, right? That's not really a realistic atmosphere to tell people that they're going to walk into. It's disingenuous. But at the same time, what we can admit, and whether, you know, it's natural bodybuilding, untested bodybuilding, powerlifting, or just sports in general, when the consensus of the fan base, which in this case the fan base is actually the athlete base and the constituency itself, is saying there's too much variance, we're not happy with the direction of the sport, it's at least someone's responsibility to pick up that lead and go, listen, we have to at least try something different. And what we're noticing in terms of a Venn diagram of what people would consider the problems do have a very expansive shared circle in the middle that all stems from, let's say, these 4 or 5 major issues. So even if we try something new and it, you know, fails to launch in terms of some small areas, we believe that the rocket is still launching in the right direction, which is that the industry needs change, and that we're at least in the lexicon and the zeitgeist of what's happening enough that we can take a look at all of these things, go on podcasts like this and talk to other athletes and say, okay, if we're going to host this show at the end of the year and you're coming from South Africa, your governing body is the INBA, what is it that you feel has been done wrong, and what is it that continues to draw you to a stage? Because my favorite thing is to hear people complain about the things that they feel are being done wrong, and then they step on 3 stages for the same federation in the next 2 weeks. And it's like, okay, well, you're voting with your dollar at this point, guy. They are not going to listen to you because you've told them, even though I'm wholly unhappy with the direction you're going, I'm still going to pay you for 5 divisions, 3 shows every 6 months, right? So I agree with you in the sense of it is a Herculean task. But unfortunately, until us, no one has felt a need to listen to all the athletes and go, okay, we might be moving in a direction, all of us in different directions. What happens if we all get on the same page and we all start pushing this boulder up the hill together? So what we're stating is, if we all get on the same page and say, DFBA, you know, we're approaching the PNBA, the WNBF, the OCB, the IPE, the GBOs, NABA, PCA, ICN, all of these federations. All we're asking is to have, let's say, a margin of error that looks XYZ, which could be as simple as keeping it to specific categories, which we have said in the DFBA. That's what we're looking for, is to basically say, if I'm looking at classic physique, and I can say, hey, this guy who's in men's physique just needs to take the board shorts off and he'd be a great classic physique guy. Or, hey, this men's physique guy, if he took the board shorts off, would be able to go right into bodybuilding. And in the same show, he wins both overalls. I don't care what your judging criteria is. You'll never be able to justify to me, unless it's a very shallow show and everybody else shows up completely off, that the same guy wearing board shorts should be able to put on bodybuilding trunks and win 2 overall titles. That, for lack of a better word, is absolute industry-leading bullshit. There's no way that someone should be able to show up to a world-level contest and walk out with 2 gold medals in different divisions. If we all agree on that, then it's at least a piece that we can start pulling from and go, okay, tell me why your judges thought that this was possible. Because everybody else in the bodybuilding division looks X, and everybody in your men's physique division looks X, and he doesn't look 100% like either of them. So is it a blended criteria? And if so, how are you going to tell your athletes to look like the median of everybody? or to just get as big and shredded as possible, and when to tell them, hey, you've crossed over, right? That's why we're starting with 3 divisions, 3 male, 3 female divisions, let's say X amount of invites. That's what we're looking to do. What's the structure that will make it so well known what we're looking for? There is no gray area. This is where it is. This is how you succeed. This is how you become the best.
Mm-hmm. What's the reciprocation of this been like so far amongst the federations that you've spoken to?
I'll let you go ahead, Dr. J.
Yeah. I've been having a lot of conversations, and we continue to do so. There's been a lot of interest. People like to do things their own way, though, right? So it's a tricky conversation to have, right? And the thing that we're trying to impart on these federations, especially for anyone listening to this right now, is the DFBA is not trying to take the identity of any federation. We want to create autonomy within these federations, right? All we're asking is that you play nice, you abide by these code of conduct, and then your athletes get the benefit of the access to this year-end show that we hope to be just absolutely epic, as well as hopefully, as we fundraise, we're able to turn back around and support the federations that support us, right? So financial incentives, boosting their production value, boosting these federations, live stream capabilities and things like that, so that anything feeding into our year-end show reaches a certain standard as well. No one thus far, coming back to your original question, that I've approached has completely snubbed us. There's a couple people that you can tell are waiting to see what happens. They have interest, but they don't want to be the early adopter. I can say with relative certainty that within the next few months, there will be anywhere from 6 to 8 federations that have signed on, with the potential of there being almost double that, depending on how a couple conversations go in the next week or two. Things that have already kind of like been in play and are hinging on the acceptance of 1 or 2 key individuals is how I'll word it.
It's a tough one, isn't it? Because obviously each of these federations are businesses at the end of the day. So it's like, if there is to a degree, like it does show where their morals lie, like whether it's a financial incentive for them or wherever they're actually aligned with, are they truly wanting to elevate natural bodybuilding, or do they want to turn over like a big profit? And I guess that's kind of like you were saying, maybe some federations like PCA kind of like maybe just cashing in on that natural bodybuilding element of things. So I feel like it's going to be interesting to see who gets on board and who doesn't, isn't it?
And I'm glad you mentioned that. Again, I don't mean to pile on them. I really don't. But the framework within the IFBB doing the same thing in the United States brings up a very interesting question, right? The reason most athletes say, I would like to go try and win my IFBB Pro card is genuinely, I want to be in the money, right? I want to be able to make this a full-time job. I want to be the next C-Bone. I want to be the next so-and-so. It doesn't matter, because the IFBB has now had a natural division for almost 2.5 years. No one in that natural division has received a single dollar from becoming an IFBB Pro. And I always ask them the same question. Let's say hypothetically, whether it's in the Untested Nationals or they make a new Nationals, you win your IFBB Pro card and they give you your hey, I can go to the Olympia. I can actually step on stage with the best. Great. You think that you're going to beat Chris Bumstead? You think that in the 212 you're going to beat Flex Lewis? It's not the same sport. So when we say these things like, well, the PCA and the IFBB, the money that people are referring to goes right into the pockets of the organization. It's never been recycled back to the athletes. So I'm not saying that it's bad to give athletes a new stage to compete. And who knows, 3-4 years, maybe next year, they decide, hey, here's a prize pot, you're right, we're going to reinvest it, and now if you win the natural nationals and you get your IFBB Pro card, you get 10 grand, okay? No one is saying that that would be a bad thing. But the reason that I've always believed it was a money grab was because whether the Mr. Olympia was in the 80s, 90s, 2000s, 10s, or 20s, there's always been a prize pot. Okay, well, if it's the same framework that you're using for your other shows, where's the natty money? Where's the natty prize pot? If you're the IFBB and that's the reason we came here was for a bigger stage to compete for bigger sponsorships and bigger money, where is it? So we, in the same sense that we're trying to give a level playing field, are trying to give equity to the athletes. We want an equitable response for your win, whether you're male or female, doesn't matter the division. If the reason the asses are in the seats is because of you, then you deserve to have your hard work paid off. So I would say to anybody who's on the fence, listen, whether you consider us a governing body of federations that you want to compete in, or you want to go to the IFBB/PCA route, I know they're different companies, but they follow the same general framework, right? Ask yourself how they're allowing you to know that your vote is being heard with your dollar, that you're giving them money and they're going, there's a chance, no matter how minuscule, because I understand if you join a professional sport, the odds that you're going to be a money-making, banking professional athlete are generally low. But the dream is I'm trying to make this a full-time job where I'm the best in the world at what I do and I get paid for it. How come none of them have shown you that same kindness? How come they've asked you to take the same things you were doing for other federations that were giving you prize pots, whether you thought they were big or not, and these other federations have not offered that to you yet? And if and when they do, great. If you want to take advantage of it, that's fine. But again, our message has always been this. Talk is cheap. I've been in so many different organization meetings that are like, this is what we plan to do for the next year, that it takes them 5 years to implement 10% of it. It's not an athlete-driven entity, right? If the athletes of a federation, if you move it to a different sport, and let's say the New York Giants wanted to unionize, okay, the owners have an invested interest to ensure that they control everything that has to do with the employment and the money. An athlete-driven entity is usually 9.99 times out of 10 the only way to ensure that the safety, longevity, and the actual further advancement of the athlete is in the athlete's hands and not the hands of people who aren't in the exact same shoes. So, that's a thing I like to remind people of is you're paying and voting into the federation to vote with your dollar. Do they repay you in kind for your hard work? If not, then the question is, why and how will they make it equitable for you where you'll go, okay, now I feel like they're out for my best interest? Ask that question. Even if you don't want to listen to us and you think the DFBA is not for you, I still would tell you as an athlete that as another athlete from one-on-one, I still care about you and your trajectory enough that that should be a question you're asking.
How do you propose, you like get enough money to give the prize pots that you're talking about? Like, what's the plan to do that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's gonna
so
same thing.
It absolutely can be done first, right? Like I always like to come back. Eric Helms has talked about it quite a bit. When you look at powerlifting as a sport, the most successful federation right now is the Tested Federation, and they are hosting the Sheffield, which gives out $50,000, right? It's all about public perception of the sport. So the more that we're able to create collaboration between the federations, the more that individuals like myself and Brandon are able to go to these large companies and say, we are representatives of a global entity that has support of 25 federations whose member bodies number in the hundreds of thousands. We want a donation, we want a sponsorship, and we're going to put your name in front of 300,000 people, right? Spread across the entire world. You have to have the numbers to go to these people to get real sponsorship. But I mean, that's the big thing, right? Like unity helps drive that for sure, but it's also thinking creatively. We have a couple different ideas. I don't know how in detail Brandon wants to go into this, but in general, like that's our job. Brandon and I are going out, having conversations with people across the entire industry, different alternative kinds of companies, and talking to them about how this is a good opportunity for them, how they'll be able to support the message that they're saying, support the industry that's feeding them, and more so than just like going to the one supplement store and the tanner and things like that, trying to get a little bit creative.
And how's that going so far? Have you had many people kind of like jump at the idea and go, oh, this sounds amazing? Like what's been the response by the corporate bodies?
Yeah, I mean, listen, even if you work for Arnold and you're doing this for his show, or you do it for, I can't remember what the production company is that runs the Olympia off the top of my head anymore, but getting the money to actually put the show on has always been the hardest part because they want to see a return on their investment. When you have a major expo, it's very easy because essentially you're still getting people to walk by, hand them samples, maybe they buy a product, no problem, right? But the people that we have talked to in terms of the actual industry have all but admitted that the message of the untested side is getting muddied by the fact that there is, and I'm the first to admit that when I first started bodybuilding, when people would ask about steroids, I would always say, listen, I understand that putting anything exogenous in your body is dangerous, but, you know, if it really was that dangerous, where are the bodies? And then the bodies started showing up, and I had to eat crow and was like, oh, no, for sure, these people died from steroid abuse, 100%. This is crazy. I don't want to go down this road. I already have problems with, anxiety and depression in my family. I don't want to exacerbate those things by using exogenous substances. If you do, more power to you. It's not for me. I'm looking for a road I can walk down myself. It's very hard for companies to sell this idea of mass appeal when the appeal is very different than it was in the 80s. So the message that we're hearing back from sponsors is, we've been looking for this message. We just couldn't approach a company, a federation, a show itself without having something that would tell us that there wasn't something coming down the pike that was going to make it look drastically different if something happened. And by that, I was a huge Cedric McMillan fan when he was alive. You know, sponsors that were looking for him to show up and win that next Olympia title, and then the day before he dies, that's a message you have to talk to your constituency about. And in this case, the constituency is a bunch of people looking to spend money on your product. That's not an easy sell after something like that happens, whether it be sport-wide or athlete-driven, in terms of, hey, we wanted to sponsor this one athlete, and now look what happened. Or we're a health company, and it looks like this guy died from doing something very unhealthy, right? Most of the people that we talk to are the exact opposite. We've been looking for a way to tout this natural idea of being healthy and how important it is to continuously monitor your health, especially when it relates to bodybuilding, because it does take us into some very deep chasms of, you know, hey, there's a gray area here. Are we being super healthy, or are we taking health to an extreme where it might actually be unhealthy? But it's still an easier sell because the odds of something terrible happening to you are not incredibly high like they would be with all these other variables that you have on the other side of the sport. So what we've heard from a lot of the sponsors is, we need a proof of concept. We need to be able to see that you can produce a show, that you can produce this level of, hey, even-keeled judging, the athletes really are the best of the best, the invite system works the way it's supposed to, it doesn't look like there's any logistical problems. If you can show us how that's supposed to run, this is a message that we would like to be associated with. So that's what we're doing, is we're doubling down on the message of an equal and equitable playing field for natural bodybuilding that touts health and performance on top of the fact of showing outliers of strength and aesthetics all on the same stage to be able to showcase what the human form is capable of. That's a message that sponsors get behind, and we're going to prove it with our proof of concept here in the first year with this show.
Lovely. Best of luck to you with that.
So in that case then, sorry, so does that mean then that there will be a show essentially hosted by you, the Super Bowl?
Yes. Yeah. So it won't be named the Super Bowl. That was so we can make some more global appeal. I mean, maybe, who knows? But what we're doing for this year, because obviously creating a brand new show is a huge endeavor, right? On top of trying to build this governing body, on top of all the other things we're trying to do. The show for this year will be an interim championship. What it is we're expanding a show that is existing, turning it into a 2-day event where the domestic portion of the show that already was in existence will be on one day, and the international championships will be on the second day. That'll be for the first year. And then within that second year, once we have the proof of concept, once we have the sponsorship money and the interest within the athletes, it will become its own thing, and then potentially turn into a global circuit. That would be the end kind of goal. Even before it turns into a global circuit, maybe even just rotating that within the federations, because again, we've all heard it too as athletes. If there's a world championship and it's always hosted in one country, it's relatively unfair to certain athletes, right? It's a financial burden, it's a time burden, and that limits your ability to showcase some of the athletes depending on their region, and we don't want that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, why does Mr. Universe always come from Earth? You know what I mean? How come Mars never wins Mr. Universe? This is bullshit, man.
I've always found that very confusing. Surely there's some Martians that really want to hit a front double. So with this show, then, it sounds like it's the MBW International show. If it's not, then fair enough. The judging panel on that particular show, then, are you going to look at getting officials from different federations, or are you just going to use the ones that's already in place?
Yeah, there'll be a mix of judging just to make sure that we are kind of even across the board. It makes a nice average. Referring back to the show, I'll remind you guys how accurate you've been on your guesses thus far. I have listened to the other episodes, so don't bank on any one show.
Hey, not very accurate.
Hey, you can read between the lines on that one.
Stormtroopers. Terrible.
The new federation, let's go.
Yeah.
No, but to be fair to us, there's been so many people think that it's a new federation. And when you talk about a show, shows are put on by federations or promoters. Promoters tend to work hand in hand with a federation. So from the outside looking in, it does look as though that it's a federation. But I think I understand now pretty much completely what it is that you wanting to achieve.
And that's why these podcasts are so crucial, and we appreciate them because it allows us time to, correct these assumptions, right? Because like you said, you guys, if you think it, so do all the other athletes, right? And it's early days where we can only release certain information at certain times. There's no way for me to explain the entire thing in one Instagram post or two Instagram posts, right? So, but those criticisms were very valid and very real, and that's again why I thank you guys for letting us come on and clarify it.
No, and again, why we're grateful for you coming on, because a lot of people receive criticism and then just run a mile. So yeah, respect to you. Reading through your Instagram posts of like your code of conduct and all that kind of stuff, drugs testing. You mentioned on there that if a federation aligns with your standards, then I can't remember what the rest of the sentence was. But what are your standards when it comes to drugs testing?
Yep. Any pro athlete that wins money will be urine analysis tested. We also prefer, and some federations are doing this, blood testing as well. We are pushing for in and out of season testing of professional athletes, which again, many federations are already doing. So a lot of that criteria is things that you're just going to say like, yeah, that's what XYZ is already doing. Good. That's what we want, right? It's the outliers that we're trying to bring up to the standard. And we do have in place a passage on a screening, a pre-show screening is how I'll word it, because the P word is scary for some federations. But we do feel like it is enough of a deterrent where it should be included, or some version of that should be included, because of the timeliness of some of the like drug abuse or use in the past, right? Like a urine analysis can be passed very easily. We're seeing it, unfortunately, in some federations that Brandon's talked about in depth, where a person might have been enhanced for multiple years and then just got clean for the show. So how do you find those people? You have to deter them for wanting to try and beat the system. And that's where a screening of some sort will help.
That particular test, yeah. Go on.
Here's the tough part, right? And I've been open and honest with this for years. There is no perfect test. There's no perfect laws. There's no perfect regulations. There's no perfect oversight body. There's not. There never has been in terms of anything in human history, right? But the issue that we've had over the last couple of years is that people are so wary and distrusting of the drug tests that as soon as someone passes all the hurdles and jumps through the hoops, they immediately then get this feedback from the general populace and again from the zeitgeist of people talking, where they go, well, yeah, but you can beat those tests. And it's like, okay, listen, we get it. You can beat the tests. Our intention is to find the cutting edge of what's possible and continuously change those things. But if what you're saying is, well, I'm never going to believe those tests, then there's nothing that me or Dr. J or anybody else is going to say to you that suddenly is going to make you go, okay, now I get it. It's because the air about how these people are approaching the narrative is, well, I never trusted those things. Right, so then you're only here to be a contrarian. Then it never was going to matter where if I give you a spinal tap, you could watch the video inside the OR and it would cue out for a minute and people go, there it is. That was it right there. They switched the P. I know it. I know they did it. They're looking for a reason to distrust the test. Fine, distrust it all you like. What we're saying is if a new level of testing exists and there's a way that we can ensure the athletes have a level playing field, we are going to entertain it, and we're going to do our best to ensure that we promote those things to the federations that sign up with us, going, listen, if what you want is to pass the smell test, this new technology exists, and until you do it, people are going to think you're running from it. Now, the major feedback has always been that the tests are very expensive. That they are. But this is the thing that when you put together basically a 5-year plan, your CFO is supposed to take a look at something like that and go, listen, this is how much it should cost for marketing, advertising, drug tests, right, to run the shows. What we've always said from the very beginning of the DFBA is, I'm not going to name the different world championships, but we've all been there. I watch $500,000 walk across that stage. Then where's the money? If what you're saying is these tests are expensive and people should trust your drug testing standards, where's the money going? If you're saying you're doing those drug tests, they should be built into your business model. We're starting from the beginning telling you guys it's our intention to build that into our business model so that everyone, as skeptical as you may be, will go, well, there's 3 levels of drug testing that when put together are basically the highest level that you can get. Cool, then until something else comes along, that's what we plan on doing. Period. Right? It's tough to buy, but it is.
So with the drugs testing, are you mainly focused on your particular show that you're going to be running, or are you wanting to get the other federations on board with it as well?
That's part of the code of conduct, right? If they sign up to be a DFBA qualifier, they have to abide by that, and that's written in there, right? So if they don't want to, sorry, but this is what we stand by.
So with what you said then, you said that it will be anyone that gets prize money in the pros. Are you not bothered about, or is it not on your radar to do drugs testing for like amateur regional shows or qualifiers leading up to the pros?
Yeah, I mean, that'll be included. I was just thinking more of that like year-end show focusing on the pro and all that. Yeah, but pretty much think of what the most stringent testing is of any federation right now. That's what we want to do. Right? Like, we're not trying to hide from anything. We're not trying to skirt around any things. If people have issues with certain tests, that's their right to be the way they want to be. We're not trying to take over their federation, but that just means that it might exclude them from what we're trying to do.
No.
There's a
brilliant
situation now where, like, obviously between each federation as well, like, there's grounds in regards to what deems a natural athlete. For instance, I know, like, the IFBB, what is it? You have to be 3 years clear from taking any, like, performance-enhancing drugs. Other federations, it's like lifelong, like never. And then I think, I don't know, maybe WNBF is like 10 years, 8 years, or something like that.
10 years for WNBF, right?
Yeah. So for you guys then, what deems like a true natural athlete, and what implications would you want to, or rules would you want to put in place for that?
Yeah, we have it written in the bylaws right now that it's 7 years, because that was the median of what we found within the true natural federations. Some had 3, some had 5, one had 10, many had 7. So it seemed like if we're trying to appease the global entity, what's the difference of 7 and 10? You know, like in reality, if someone's taken something 8 years ago and that was the last time, like, I don't know, like it's tough to split hairs any further than that.
And I'm a science guy. It really comes down to, too, where unless you're taking a look at somebody's, like, the legality of looking at having an eyeball of a fat-free mass index and go, the way that guy looks is, physiologically impossible. Drug tests only work to the point where you're scientifically able to prove them. And even at the picogram level, which is like taking a grain of salt and cutting it into 1 million pieces, over the course of 2 or 3 years, you might get an undulating effect of reading like a 2 or 3 picogram level reading. After 7 years, you basically could just tell people you're natural, and no test in the world is gonna tell you otherwise, because it's scientifically impossible at that point to look for long-term metabolites, especially if you've cut down that much and all this stuff is fat stored. You don't really store that many long-term metabolites after that. So it really does come down to, listen, it would be disingenuous for us to say you have to be able to prove you're a lifetime natural to do that. Okay, after 5 to 7 years, it's basically every man's word against somebody else's. So that's not us saying that we want people to cheat the system, be able to use for a couple of years and then come back. What we're saying is we're not self-centered and blind enough to be able to say we're able to find out who's a real lifetime natural athlete. No, we're going to be at the cutting edge of the science to try to figure it out. And at the end of the day, if it says that you are, and if it says that you're not, because we have we're aiming to have the most robust drug testing. So I think that it's disingenuous of a federation to say we can tell for sure who is and who isn't lifetime natural. So 5 to 7 years makes the most scientific sense to say we can catch long-term metabolites at 5 to 7 years, and after that, we wouldn't be able to realistically prove anything anyway.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Tom, do you have any killer questions to finish on?
Not so much questions. I think it's more just like suggestion, really. I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but outside looking in, and obviously I know what you're doing here is very early on, and you're jumping on podcasts in order to spread this message, which is great. But I feel like there's a lot of like the up-and-coming natural bodybuilders who are you obviously, in a way, you're doing this for everyone, but this is going to impact them a lot, those people that are at the start of their natural bodybuilding careers right now. I feel like the message needs to be so clear for them. And even myself, like reading through and what you guys have got out there right now, it was quite difficult to understand some of the things that are going on. And obviously things like this are absolutely going to help with that. But I feel like really making it easy to understand for even the younger guys coming up and girls is going to be like a huge thing in order to really get everyone on board with this.
Yeah.
Thank you for saying that.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, that's a piece of valuable feedback that we will say, listen, we want this to look professional and polished, but if it's so professional and polished with jargon that, a millennial or a Gen Z guy doesn't know what the hell that means, then we're missing the message. We might be getting the intent behind the DFBA correct, but we're missing the target market because we're muddying up with what we think is industry jargon and what everybody else thinks is junk. You know what I mean? So, even though if to you were like, I don't want to say this to them, I would thank you for saying that, because it gives us something after this podcast to go back to a different table and go, we have a very realistic feedback point of one of the 12 people that we've talked to so far about it, and they want it to be more straightforward and cut and dry, bottom line up front. So thanks for saying that. We'll take it right after this podcast and figure out what we can do to make it better.
Yeah, I feel like if you could really hammer home the point of, right, okay, how does this affect me as an athlete? And then if you could get the majority of people that are going to be funding these organizations on board with it and be like, no, like we want a change because we genuinely support this message because it's, we can relate to it that much. Like that's going to make it much easier for those federations to get on board because, well, who's going to be paying the bills? It's majority the competitors that are in line with what you want to achieve,
All right.
Yeah. Yeah, as I say, like the burden of proof is on us, right? Like we have to prove ourselves. So we've seen negative comments already on some of the posts, and it's like, oh, this is valid. Like you don't understand because you can't understand because the information's not there. So how you interpret what we're doing is you have every right to be a little bit like incredulous or curious or a little bit hostile at times. But hey, I get it, right? Like we're trying to come in and disrupt the industry and say like we know the answer, which in reality, like we're trying to work towards that answer, but maybe we're not nailing it right off the bat. But that's the beauty of it. Everything we're doing, it's a living document. It's a living governing body. So it will adapt and evolve based on the feedback that we get.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. 100%.
Right, gents, it's obviously late in the day. I'm going to finish off with one more question, right? And then we're done and dusted. Right. I am a big fan of manifestation and believing and backing yourself. What is the best case scenario to happen over the next 3 years when it comes to the DFBA and natural bodybuilding on the whole?
Brandon, crush it. You're good at this kind of stuff.
Come on, Brandon. Let's go.
No pressure.
I like being put on the spot like this because it lets me speak from the heart. And as much as I've done this for a very long period of time, talking to people and things like that, I really do talk from that part of me, which is my heart and my soul in terms of the sport. The best case scenario is in 3 years, the athletes have the best possible stage to not only have a fair and level playing field, but a transparent way to take their pro card and to prove to everybody, federations aside, I'm the best at what I do. And not only am I the best at what I do, there's nobody in the world that can try to take that away from me, because there's an organization out there that's not a federation, but a governing body that has provided the athletes with a stage to be able to showcase the best in what the human performance aspect of aesthetics looks like. It's not about the DFBA. We're not trying to be millionaires. I don't want a new federation. I don't want a tattoo on some guy that says DFBA on his back. What I want is at the end of every year for people to talk about our shows from the previous year and go, man, those guys really know how to bring the best in the industry out and give us a bullhorn to showcase what we're about. The DFBA over the next 3 years is not about the DFBA. The DFBA is about you guys. Everybody who's listening to this, every athlete that wanted change, and every federation head that felt painted into a corner. We're giving everybody an option, and we hope over the next 3 to 5 years to showcase the message of what natural bodybuilding was, what it is, and what it can be, so that for generations after this, there's no more explanation in terms of the difference between the IFBB and the natural bodybuilding world. It's just two different roads to the same end that moves toward a specific goal. And our goal is, we want to show the best natural athletes, period, hands down, bar none, no exceptions.
And just to build on that really quick, I want there to be true pride in being a natural athlete, right? I don't know. I mean, you guys over in the UK have it where it seems very nice, where there's whole contingents of athletes in certain gyms. But where I am, I'm the only natural competitor in my gym. People ask me, what do you do? I bodybuild. And they look at me and go, you're 180 pounds. Like, what are you talking about, right? And you almost have to clarify, like, oh, but I'm a natural guy. Like, I'm small. I know. I want to change that perception. I want the public perception to be natural bodybuilding is bodybuilding. And that's what we're proud of. And that's what we know. I want people to see our champions and look towards them just like we did, Lee Labrada, Arnold, all those guys. And that can happen. We just have to spread awareness of what we're doing.
Beautiful stuff, boys. Right, and on that, we are going to wrap up the podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, if you want to go and follow the DFBA, just search it on Instagram, it comes up. And yeah, like and subscribe. Drop us a comment. If you've got any questions, shoot them over to the boys, and I'm sure they will answer. But yeah, we'll see you in the next one. Boys, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Stay blessed.
Yeah, appreciate your time, guys, and hopefully everyone listening has got a bit of a clearer idea now in regards to where things are, and obviously we can now rectify our previous mistake in the podcast, the New Federation. But now again, yeah, thank you for your time, guys. Everyone, where can James? Where can everyone find you?
My personal would be J.Johnson.DPT on Instagram, and then obviously the business side of things is DFB_global.
Perfect. And Brandon, what about yourself?
BGF_Lirio is my personal one, and then my business in terms of the DFBA aside would be BGN_CT, and then DFBA_global.
Lovely stuff. Right, thank you very much, guys, and we'll catch you in the next one. Cheers.